Should I apologize for not giving a better review to Sonic the Hedgehog 3? No, fuck no. What kind of stupid fucking question is that? But apparently you have to open YouTube videos with a confrontational-ass direct question now in order to get your click rate up, so there you go. Look, January is always like the shittiest time to release any kind of content on this platform if you're any kind of movie, pop culture, critic thing, whatever, because there's almost nothing coming out, and what is coming out is awards bait or big movies that you either reviewed back when they were showing out for the awards cycle, or that doesn't track super well on a video platform that has an increasingly younger fan base. Case in point, did I see Nosferatu? Yeah, I did. It's pretty good. Am I gonna post a video of it? Yeah. Do reviews of Nosferatu pull particularly well on YouTube? Not really, no. It's actually doing pretty well for a horror movie. If YouTube hadn't borked its whole algorithm to mainly favor old guys with beards bitching about TV shows that they only watch to hate watch, that would probably be pretty good content. But YouTube did the opposite of that, so fuck me. So until the stuff that I saw back in November so it could qualify for awards ballots, but that the rest of you don't get to see until February or later, apparently the only thing the algorithm says people want to watch is election stuff. No, I'd rather claw my eyes out at this point, pivoting the channel hard into grumpy Gen Xer bigotry, or find an excuse to put Sonic the Hedgehog on a thumbnail. So here's an excuse to put Sonic the Hedgehog on a thumbnail. And in all seriousness, I gave real consideration as to whether or not I should do an entire episode about why I just can't connect with the Sonic movies, when apparently a lot of people, including a lot of my peers, younger peers, even some older peers, have found quite a bit to like in these movies that I just don't get it. Like, I'm not putting on airs or doing a bit to rage bait for clicks. Believe me, if I wanted to rage bait for clicks, I would find something that I was much more passionate about than the fact that I think these are just below to slightly below average movies. Like I said, if I had the stomach for it at this point, I'd just do straight up political content. The numbers are much better. You end up feeling like that one episode of The Critic where the little girl kicks him in the nuts, I think, because he didn't like The Lion King. Which, incidentally, I was this close. You were all spared. You were spared by pure inertia of me just not having the emotional bandwidth from doing a whole episode about how this fake manufactured Barbenheimer in reverse make-believe rivalry of the Mufasa prequel and Sonic 3, trying to turn that into a thing, was stupid. Basically derailed only by both movies doing pretty good. Anyway, I'm well off track at this point. I did not want to do a whole episode about that, and I really didn't want to do a whole episode about why I dislike the Sonic movies, because I don't think it's just some big mystery. I don't think they're super good movies, and I say so from a critical perspective, but every time I even bring it up, it comes into this generational thing, and especially when I have to hear from people about, you don't like these because you're a Mario fan, because, guys, the console wars from the 90s ended before the 90s did, almost. Like, Sega stopped having consoles and Sonic was on Nintendo platforms before many of you were born. Sonic and Mario did crossover games. Sonic was in Smash. Like, that's over. That's not a real thing anymore. This is Japanese soldier on an island who doesn't know World War II ended shit. Come on. And I don't think, this isn't like the Snyder Cut stuff where there's a whole cultural political thing all tied into it. It's not something worth getting worked up about, which is why you're getting rambling narration instead of a full episode here, because I don't have much to say other than I have not yet found an inroad to enjoying the Sonic movies, other than I understand why people who really enjoy them. I don't think that that makes them good movies. Like, I'm not blind to it. I understand that there are portions of these movies where all of the bad stuff that's in them with the human actors and the stories not being good, and where you can tell that whole chunks of them are just sectioned off for, look, we have to make this while we can. Jim Carrey is very expensive, so a bunch of this movie is just Jim Carrey acting opposite himself or acting opposite nothing in a green screen or a single set, and those parts go away and the movie just becomes a partially live action, partially realistic CGI recreation of a cutscene from a Dreamcast game that meant a lot to people when they were children or teenagers. I get that. Shadow gets on the motorcycle and he chases Sonic. Sonic and Shadow power up to their golden forms and they fly around in space and fight the robots, and for a second there, this is the coolest thing you've seen, and it's like seeing a favorite comic book panel or a favorite anime scene realized on the big screen, and for 2 minutes of movie, it's a good movie. I get it. it doesn't make the other 90 minutes plus of movie good, but I get why you look up from your phone in the theater and enjoy that part. I get it. As a connoisseur of remembering nostalgia movies from when I was a kid and remembering, yeah, this movie basically sucked, but there are good parts to it, I understand. There are tons of... Clash of the Titans is a movie that I love. Most of that movie is not very good, but you watch it for individual 2 to 5 minute scenes of cool monsters and Greek stuff happening. Most of that movie isn't that good. Most of that movie is just Harry Hamlin wandering through day for night shots. But then for a couple of minutes, there's a Medusa sequence, and it's awesome. Or they release the Kraken, and it's cool. And yes, I have multiple different DVD releases of Clash of the Titans in my home. I have Blu-rays and DVDs and ones that came in like special slip sleeves, so I get that. I have RoboCop 2 on DVD. RoboCop 2 sucks. RoboCop is a movie. RoboCop 2 sucks. But it's got a great stop-motion robot fight in it. The original Supergirl movie sucks, but it's got the best flying special effects of all the Superman movies. Like, by that point, they had really figured out how to make it look like someone was flying, and the flying special effects are great in that. That's pretty much it. So I understand the concept of bad movie, good parts that you remember. You remember that movie Valerian? I know everyone kind of like memory hold this movie because Luc Besson went bye-bye. Bye-bye, Luke, we don't need you anymore. Right after that, literally right after that. And that movie is a not good movie and a not good adaptation of that material. But like the opening 5 minutes of that movie is like one of my favorite things in science fiction ever. Sometimes I just watch that part. So I get enjoying a bad movie. So suffice it to say, truce and peace to the fans of the Sonic movies. I will probably never like these as much as you do, but I get why you do. And sorry to disappoint, but if you're looking to debate it, I'm not going to do that because there's not a debate to be had. I'm sorry. What I can do is collect all of the prior to the Sonic 3 review opinions that I've had about this from the first trailer, which was a Game Over Thinker episode, as it turns out. That's how long ago this was, in 2019, to some thoughts before the first movie, and the review of the first movie, and etc., all put together, and put it in a collected piece here, which is what I did, which will be after this. I also want to note, before that part gets started, some of this was recorded, some of these episodes were recorded, the audio in them, in 2019 and 2020. At a certain point there, I had gotten sick with a terrible head cold and lost my voice, just completely lost my voice for a certain amount of time. And when it came back, my vocal cords were fucking shredded for months. People who watched the show, actually while it was still on the old Escapist site for a while, will remember this. There were a couple episodes that my brother Chris read the audio for, and the remastered versions either had altered audio eventually, or I re-recorded the audio. So a few of these episodes sound unusual, my voice sounds unusual, there's re-recorded audio or spliced audio in parts. There are notices on some of them about this, but I want to make it completely clear. This was that period of time that was basically a prelude to the pandemic and multiple other things. The loss of my voice was not COVID. I did get COVID after that, and it sucked. I got COVID about a year after that, and it sucked. But whatever it was that killed out my voice happened before the widespread COVID pandemic. First thing I did was go to my doctor and have that checked out. And my doctor said, no, you did not have COVID, which still just blows my mind and shocks you. But yeah, no, so just wanted to throw that note on there. Anyway, here's old episodes about the Sonic franchise. I'm sure we will have this conversation again, but yeah, here's that. Nothing but love. All right, let's watch the trailer for the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Not the whole thing, though. I don't want us to get a YouTube strike at some point. Huh?
Nope! I'm wrong. I'm in charge.
Allow me to clarify.
Oh, God, no.
Gotta go fast.
What did you do? Make it stop, make it stop. So that looks really bad. Man, between this and that Power Rangers movie, 90s nostalgia must feel like one continuous kick right in the balls, huh? Anyway, this looks bad all around, but also bad in weirdly specific ways. Like 90% of what seems to have gone wrong here, you can sum up with the word studio notes, like meaning whatever the idea was, at some point it got changed into that because a producer or an executive or marketing team had an idea that the people making the movie had to find a way to fit in, whether it was going to work out or not, which is usually what happens on these things. But in this case, it looks like there were only studio notes, as in, I'm having trouble imagining there was ever a base movie here outside the standard, let's have the animated character we licensed to sell dolls of get followed from one place to another place by the bad guy alongside whatever B-list sort of famous actors we find to be in this template from every other goddamn movie like this for them to have piled these suggestions onto. I almost wonder if every bad kids movie idea anyone suggested at Paramount over the last couple years just got kicked over into this eventually as a way to get rid of them. Oh no, you're right, Bill. Cartoon animals should have terrifyingly human teeth for no reason. But you know, the Nickelodeon people have some crazy idea that people should still like SpongeBob after the next movie, right? So, hey, why don't you try it out in the Sonic movie? Sega does not give a what we're doing to that thing. I mean, look, I have an animation pet peeve about this thing where they just put realistic fur and skin textures on 3D models but still animate them like full-on cartoons instead of something that has joints and muscles and a skeleton, because it makes them look actually more fake than if he'd just been a full-on cartoon or just, you know, put a kid or a short guy in a puppet suit. Like, seriously, is anyone gonna argue that the Jim Henson people could not have put a better-looking Sonic together than this? I mean, the 90s Ninja Turtles look better than this. Yoshi from the Mario Brothers movie looked better than this. Hell, Howard the Duck looked better than this. The duck, anyway. But every design decision here is wrong. Why is he proportioned like a full-sized adult person but shrunken? Why is his head tiny? Is it just lazy motion capture modeling? Why do the eyes look like just two different colored parts of his skull that are smooth instead of eyeballs? That's worse than the big Cyclops thing from the games. Why did they give him white furry hands instead of gloves, but he still has to wear the sneak? I know it's because they're gonna try to sell the f***ing sneakers. And if you're gonna go with the realistic fur thing, why is it still styled into the big pointy stalks? That's not... Hedgehogs don't have a mane. They're Erinaceidae. They have quills or spines, really. The point is, the points on Sonic are a cartoon exaggeration of an animal with spines. He already doesn't look much like Sonic. You could have just given him blue spines. That's probably a better design. It would look like, you know, long hair or dreadlocks or something. Although with dreadlocks, then I guess he'd just look like a blue Knuckles. Wait, is Knuckles in this? Oh god, they're gonna do a Ugandan Knuckles joke, aren't they? But it also looks like he does have the spines anyway, because I guess that's what's going to turn Jim Carrey from regular person Dr. Robotnik into the Dr. Robotnik from the games, and I guess they're calling him that instead of Dr. Eggman, which, okay, fine. Oh yeah, and hey, Jim Carrey's back, and it's been long enough since he did this whole thing that enough people probably forgot how tired they got of it. Yay.
In a sequentially ranked hierarchy based on level of critical importance, the disparity between us is too vast to quantify.
I'm not even sure what the aesthetic here is. Like, what are they selling? Who is this for? Like, at least those first two terrible Smurfs movies, you knew what the general thinking was. Oh, they're in New York with Neil Patrick Harris, so clearly they're shooting for older millennials who remember the Smurfs cartoon, but now love him on How I Met Your Mother. But who is being pitched this? I mean, Sonic is kind of recognizable as himself still, and it's one of the only major nostalgia properties in video games that actual children are still pretty big on, sure, but he doesn't look cuddly. Like, he looks like a weird ropey dog toy. I don't see tons of kids demanding the Build-A-Bear version of this thing. All the action scenes kind of look like pre-Bumblebee Transformers, you know, i.e. stuff audiences stopped being into like 5 years ago. And why is the trailer music Gangsta's Paradise? Seriously, that's the weirdest goddamn thing about this. It makes no sense. That's not a fast song. It's not a song about hedgehogs. There's no strong association that I know of between the two, and it's not a fun, upbeat action trailer song. It's the dark, tragic rumination of a young man hardened by a life of poverty and crime, admitting that he hates his life but is also resigned to being unable to escape from it because of crushing societal forces beyond his control.
I'm 23 now, but will I live to see 24? The way things are going, I don't know.
I mean, Sonic's whole thing isn't gangsta, he's punk, and he's not even really punk. He's like Bart Simpson, Dennis the Menace, slingshots, and spray paint little kid punk. I don't even remember typically associating Sonic with classic 90s hip-hop, despite coming from the same era, but is that it? Is it a, hey 90s kids, remember Sega, Jim Carrey comedies, and top Google search result for popular song 1995? Also, they've definitely killed this song with this, right? Like, for a while, the joke with Gangsta's Paradise was that it was super overplayed in the 90s because, oh crap, my generation got old early. It was attached to this not-that-great movie called Dangerous Minds that I feel like people don't remember nearly as well as the song, which blew up way bigger and was like the biggest track that year, that couple of years probably, and Weird Al did a parody and Coolio's label got mad about it and it was this whole thing. But like, this has probably done it for what was pretty much the legacy song for Coolio other than Fantastic Voyage, right? Like, Gangsta's Paradise is now the terrible Sonic trailer song, because you know now every time they do a movie with either a talking animal or a video game character, someone's going to take the trailer, recut it to Gangsta's Paradise, and that'll go viral because everyone will get the joke that it's, haha, oh yeah, right, like that awful Sonic movie. Anyway, yeah, that's what I think about that whole thing. Hey, as the upfront notice should have informed you, I am laboring under some semi-non-functioning vocal cords, so in lieu of a paragraph narrative structure, we're doing this in list form, which cuts down on the amount of interstitial material I have to read. I know that's not ideal, but this way you still get the episode. Anyway, there's a new live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movie in theaters this week for some reason.
This can't be happening to me. Oh my god, stop the car right now! What?
It was supposed to be out in the summer, but the internet got mad that they changed the design for what Sonic was supposed to look like, and it was such a publicity shit show that the studio pulled it from release and made them design a whole new Sonic that the internet now think looks better, I guess. The movie still looks exactly the same. I haven't seen it yet. The animators all had to work extra crunch shifts and got laid off and their studio got shut down anyway, but hey, you got a marginally more accurate blue rat, so yay. Anyway, finally, Sonic has his movie, but it's far from the first time Sega's surprisingly long-lived mascot hero has been brought to life through adaptation, so let's look back at the history of Sonic adaptations. Yeah. When Sega of Japan initially licensed Sonic the Hedgehog for merchandising and tie-in features in the early 1990s, there wasn't exactly a deep well of material, mythos, or other characters to draw from. Most of the development outside of getting the gameplay polished had gone into Sonic himself in an extremely general scenario setup that wasn't translated in depth for the various American companies contracted to create content based on it. Essentially, animation studios and merchandisers were on their own, working out what to do with Sonic other than a lot, which was what Sega's saturation strategy was all about. Whereas Nintendo had been relatively careful handing out the keys to Mario and their other properties, Sega wanted Sonic to be everywhere.
Why can't it be more like that nice boy Mario? Oh! Little brat!
And the first place everywhere turned out to be was 1993's Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. A single-season, 65-episode comedy cartoon produced by Deke and Bobbit that basically wrapped Sonic, Tails, and Dr. Robotnik around the frame of a basic Bugs Bunny versus Yosemite Sam, or more accurately, Felix the Cat versus the Professor setup. It was hardly a bad show, but also not exactly memorable. If you've seen one episode of it, you've pretty much seen every episode of it. It was effectively designed for after-school filler material, right down to the dirt-cheap sweatshop animation Deke was notorious for using in those days. The big get was getting then-TV megastar Jaleel White, aka Urkel, as the voice of Sonic, which he reprised in the simultaneously produced alternate Saturday morning variation. A co-production between Deke and an Italian animation studio, the Saturday morning version of Sonic the Hedgehog, referred to as Sonic Sadam for differentiation, was the exact flip side of the Sonic doesn't really have much of a background in games beyond an enemy who's a mad scientist who turns animals into robots and makes something up pickle that had faced the early adaptations. Whereas Adventures had boiled that premise down to a straightforward gagfest, Sadam went with an expansive running narrative that bore little resemblance to the tone of the actual Sonic games, aiming at keeping a young audience interested following the series week to week as part of an ABC network lineup. In this version, Sonic and the original character Princess Sally
because Sega hadn't made up any women yet, are co-leaders of a guerrilla rebellion of woodland animals, fighting against easily the most menacing version of Dr. Robot, voiced by the great Jim Cummings, in a long-form story that involved the insurgent campaign to overthrow a dictatorship and restore a true king, because mass media took exactly one lesson from the success of Star Wars, and it was that a team of rebels coded as American teenagers fighting against generic authoritarian state can be used to sell anything. Nostalgically speaking, I feel like this is still the best Sonic cartoon by default, but I'll readily admit that apart from Sonic being in it, it has almost nothing to do with the property itself. But the dystopian angst and unfinished cliffhanger ending have earned Sonic SatAM a place in the 90s dark animation cult classic pantheon, alongside gargoyles and SWAT cats and Batman the Animated Series. Yes, it also has connections to the long and even more confusing history of the Archie comic Sonic line, and we're not getting into that. I'm not doing a show about Sonic comics. I'm just not. Yeah, so Sega kinda hit the wall at the turn of the century, and the Dreamcast turned out to be a dream deferred. Supposedly, Sonic Underground, the final geek animated Sonic series, was developed with an eye on promoting a console, and went about as well as everything else related to the Dreamcast did. As with Sonic SatAM, it's best remembered for its theme song, though not for the right reasons.
Triplets born, the throne awaits. A seer warns of a deadly fate. Give up your children, separate. Bide your time, lie in wait. Sonic Underground, Sonic Underground. They made a vow their mother will be found.
Now, in between all these shows, there was also a Sonic anime, a two-part OVA to be precise, but unlike the other gaming properties of the day where one could look to the Japanese-produced material to deliver a closer version of the property, there wasn't much to work with here. So this version has Sonic and Tails fighting to save a president's daughter from an interplanetary warp zone situation between two planets, but it did feature the animated debuts of both Knuckles and Metal Sonic, so it had that going for it at least. Knuckles also has a hat in this version for some reason. By default, the early 2000s anime series Sonic X is still probably the most commercially successful Sonic adaptation, at least until the movie hits. A fusion of the then-current Sonic games cast and nominal plotlines and the episodic tropes of other then-popular merchandise-based anime shows like Digimon, etc. This one had Sonic and company as visitors from another world getting caught up in the drama of a wealthy family and their precocious kids. It ended up being much more popular in the West than in Japan, leading to an extended third season where everything went all cosmic and... You know, honestly, guys, I've tried to wrap my brain around Sonic X a few times, and it's just not taking. And given that it's a narratively impenetrable anime that ran on Fox Kids in the early zeros, I'm sure there's like an army of zealots online who consider it the Iliad of their generation, so I'm just going to acknowledge that it exists and move on. And the last most recent adaptation was a 3D animated episodic series that redesigned everyone to be really in shape and wearing workout tape because that was trendy for a hot minute and tied into a series of games doing basically the same. It ran for about a year on cable, and I don't know that anyone really had strong feelings about it one way or another, but Sonic Boom definitely existed. You know, I almost wish there was some kind of thesis to arrive at after all this time, but the unfortunate fact of life for Sonic and Sonic fans is that Sega did a better job building a mascot than they did building a brand for him to represent. In a way, the appropriateness of the original Speed gimmick has come to cast the Blue Hedgehog as a kind of tragic figure, one perpetually in motion, unable to stop rushing forward, never in one place, never keeping to a single identity, always a vessel for whatever the new trend or angle is. Maybe, after this movie at least, some point Sonic will be able to slow down and be one thing and finally exist in and of himself. Or maybe not. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture. What, did you think this was going to be good? So a year later than it was supposed to come out because people on the internet got mad that the blue rat didn't look enough like the blue rat in the video games, Sonic the Hedgehog is now in theaters as a pretty bad, largely forgettable, paint-by-numbers formula studio family comedy with twice the expensive blue rat that looks a little bit more like it did in the 90s, which it was based on. And I don't know what else to tell ya. It's exactly the same terrible movie as Hop, the Smurfs, Alvin and the Chipmunks, Peter Rabbit, The First Scooby-Doo, Mac and Me, Garfield, literally every other movie where a studio paid for a popular licensed character that didn't really have that much of a concept to back it up for a feature and said stick it in a car next to a B-list actor and see if that's a movie. But we're supposed to care marginally more because it's Sonic the Hedgehog, and that was hot second back in the mid-1990s where that was a very big deal in video games. Look, I Don't know if you can tell, but I'm recovering from a severe sickness that's left my vocal cords pretty well shredded, and I honestly resent the fact that I'm having to tax them more to further explain to you why a movie that's almost no chance of being good isn't good. But anyway, since it would be charitable to suggest that Sonic has ever had a coherent backstory of his own in the games, the movie just unironically borrows the same E.T.-like mold that was already roundly mocked in the movie Paul and follows it beat for beat without a hint of self-awareness or self-respect. Sonic is a teenage, I guess, speed-powered alien from an unnamed animal planet who escapes to Earth ostensibly to protect his supposed powers via dimension-hopping magic rings. He hides out in a small town in Montana for years as a rarely seen local cryptid, developing a wacky, lonely guy persona, and through an overly complicated series of events accidentally manages to expose himself to government alien hunters and zaps his magic teleport to safety rings across the country to San Francisco for some reason, while also temporarily disabling his speed powers, meaning he has to enlist the help of a hapless local sheriff, played by James Marsden, to transport him to the Bay City in order to get off-world before he's captured by Jim Carrey's increasingly manic Dr. Robotnik, which, yes, means that this is another movie where the money spent on animating a CGI main character and largely pre-visualized action sequences is saved by having most of the rest of the film take place in a generic-looking small-town backlot and overcast interstate highway. Oh, but one nice thing is that even though it's otherwise a by-the-numbers family comedy with a road trip setting, they don't insert that same pointless scene from every other version of this, you know, where the characters randomly decide to hang out in a biker bar and dance, ride a mechanical bull, and have a dumb fight scene for no reason. No, I'm kidding, they do exactly that. Like this is a Steve Guttenberg movie from 1987. Now, the main selling points here are supposed to be Jim Carrey and Sonic himself, and Sonic isn't really much of a character in this. He doesn't strike me as familiar to any version of himself from the games or cartoons. He doesn't have a personality beyond clingy and whiny. There's no real sense of what he's meant to be or doing ever established or discovered. I guess we're supposed to like him because he looks like a stuffed animal, basically, but he mostly hangs around with adults who act uncomfortable and weird around him, and he only ever interacts with a child once, which is cute, and kind of feels like maybe that should be the movie. Like, conceptually, what does a hedgehog have to do with a police officer? You can sort of feel the filmmakers leaning on Carrey to step in and save this thing as Robotnik, and he'd clearly be trying, but there's nothing for even the king of stretching a premise to work with here. They've removed the gimmick of the villain turning animals into robots, so there's nothing for him to work with. He's just a mad scientist who makes drone tech for the government, and he's a weird, spazzy narcissist because he is. There's no center to him. We're not sure if he's supposed to be an actual threat or just a buffoon, and that's really a problem with the whole movie summarized. We don't understand who anyone is, why they're doing what they're doing, what needs to be accomplished, why we're supposed to care. I never even gave a shit whether Sonic lived or died, which is a problem when the soundtrack starts insisting I'm supposed to. And you know, for all the money they supposedly spent on the CGI, none of the effects look appreciably better than an average network TV show, regardless whether you think Sonic himself looks better now or not. So I don't even feel like giving it points for that. So I'll go 2 out of 10 for this, because I think I laughed like twice, but you know what this made me think of more than anything else? Howard the Duck. It's the exact same movie as Howard the Duck, and just as bad as Howard the Duck, but you know, at least Howard the Duck, while being bad, was also weird and sketchy and a little bit sleazy and had an actual terrifying villain, completely inappropriate for a kids movie, because it was actually trying to do something of its own deranged little way, you know? Whereas this is just trying to exist as this bland, flat, basic, off-the-shelf pablum, meeting just the minimum basic requirements of being a movie, because they paid for the rights to Sonic and had to release something eventually. So here it is, Sonic the Hedgehog, the even worse version of Howard the Duck.
Having been a professional film critic for over a decade and a video game playing dork for basically my entire life, as a film critic and video game playing dork for the entire rise, and now, well, it seems to be leveling off. This is just the world now stasis of dork media properties dominating the movie blockbuster landscape. I've managed to develop something like a sixth sense for when that's going to make things difficult for me, i.e. when will being a film critic who has to objectively report on his subjective opinion of whether or not a movie is bad find me catching, let's call it, blowback from my fellows in the world of gaming who insist that a given film adjacent to said world is in fact not bad. I'd say the same is also true in reverse, but that hasn't really happened yet, and here comes the rotten fruit. This cycle's model, of course, is Sonic the Hedgehog, which revived the celebrity who made some poor financial decisions driving to a place with a merchandisable animated intellectual property genre that everyone complained about being formulaic and shitty all through the beginning of the millennium, but we're now pretending is sort of passable because people still enjoy Sonic conceptually, and if it's a hit, the next one might, in defiance of all logic, be good, and hey, maybe we'll get to see other beloved Sonic characters like Tails and Knuckles and... Anyway, I've kind of made the Sonic movie a bit of a punching bag recently because it's not good. Poorly directed, the main character isn't interesting, the storyline is trite and predictable, there's nothing to emotionally engage with, it lacks a sense of the cohesion, fails to do even anything remotely interesting with the juxtaposition of, say, a character defined by speed, aka forward progression, whose nemesis is a mad scientist who believes in radical technological accelerationism, sweeping into their conflict an ordinary man pulled between a small town in Montana defined by slow pace, stability, and a possible future in San Francisco, literally the current American capital of out-of-control venture tech capital, future development, and fast-lane living. This is sitting right there in the text of the movie you wrote, waiting to be fitted together and used as actual subtext, and you just leave it there? I mean, hell, Dr. Robotnik doesn't even use animals or animal experimentation to power his drones, which would not only have been a creepy reveal to make him more hateable and closer to the games, but it would also have given a direct rationale for him becoming obsessed with Sonic, other than just because, and a reason for why his drones are supposedly so much better than everyone else's that wouldn't have had to lamp Ahem. As I was saying, I've made jokes at the expense of Sonic being a very bad movie, in my estimation, but it's possible I've gone to that well too many times a row, especially since it's a movie for small children. It's not like it's Pixels or Batman v Superman or anything like that. I mean, it's bad, yeah, but it's harmless. And also, I'm on a tight schedule this week, my voice is still coming back, so you win. Here's 5 things that I didn't dislike about Sonic the Hedgehog. Okay, this is dumb, but it's a dumb movie, so sue me. Back when Sonic was a new thing in the US and they had to do cartoons, it was the 90s and Sega literally gave the American showrunners nothing resembling an outline for what he was supposed to be other than...
He's edgy. He's in your face. You've heard the expression, let's get busy? Well, this is a dog who gets busy. Consistently and thoroughly.
So he's proactive, huh?
Oh, God, yes. We're talking about a totally outrageous paradigm.
Excuse me, but proactive and paradigm, aren't these just buzzwords that dumb people use to sound important? Not that I'm accusing you of anything like that. I'm fired, aren't I?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that. But it was the 90s and the Ninja Turtles made assign talking animals a single junk food to be obsessed with a thing, so Sonic got chili dogs for some reason, and ever since then it's come and gone as a meme, and there was a bit where he stopped to eat a bunch of them during one of the dumb Matrix bullet time sequences, and I did smile because...
I understood that reference.
Jim Carrey is fine in this, I guess. I don't want to be mean, because you can see they put a lot of thought into his casting as this huge saving throw, like, oh, this is perfect, he's so great at this, he hasn't done a family comedy in a few years, it'll be a comeback story for him, he can spin gold out of whatever you give him, and the same people seeing this as adults because they liked the games in the 90s, and now they're cynical 30-year-olds primed to be judgy were also his original blow-up fan base, so they'll get all nostalgic that he's back, and that'll rub off on the movie. I mean, I get it, he's fine in doing a PG-rated version of his sociopath routine from Cable Guy and Me, Myself, and Irene. I'm not sure it would stick out if the rest of the movie weren't the rest of the movie, but, you know, at least in concept. Otherwise, I kind of appreciate that this version of the character, who from game to game was all over the map and as empty as everything else, is presented as kind of an actual menace. I mean, maybe I'm just old and this is the world for kids now, but like in E.T. in the 80s when the hazmat teams and the men in black and the trucks and sci-fi gear and a whole army just rolled up into Elliot's house, the fact that that turns out to be just our government and not like evil aliens was this mind-blowing, scary perspective shift in the movie that upends everything. But here, it's just matter of fact, yeah, this guy is an off-the-books Black Ops killer from the government who uses drones and he's just an asshole right off the bat and the bad guy. That's pretty dark. Like, he's bad at what he's doing, mostly because Sonic is something he hasn't encountered before, but he's not incompetent. He's capable of everything he says he's going to do. It's clear he holds everyone in the small town in total contempt. He'll gladly murder all of them without a second thought. It's all kids' gloves implication, but if they bothered to write some stakes to care about into this, I might have, so it's something. Okay, fine, this is cheating. There weren't actually that many things I liked in the movie, but it's nice to have an even 5. The part where the little girl notices that the, at that point, injured and unconscious Sonic's shoes are old and damaged, so she gives him a new pair and it turns out to be the iconic red shoes from the game, is in fact a really sweet moment. It's well shot, the angles are right, the young girl is a good actress, and it's really setting the moment considering she's acting probably opposite just a Sonic prop and a couple tennis balls on the set. It's a nice music cue, and I even heard a few people in the theater who've been laughing ironically have a sincere moment because, hey, iconography matters. I mean, if it didn't, we wouldn't be in the theater watching a fucking Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Just think what that moment would have been if this kid had shared one other scene with Sonic before that, or if we'd suggested that shoes in particular were in any way important or meaningful to him in the first place. We react Pavlov style to this stuff because we recognize that these are the Sonic shoes, similar to other movies, where a character gets their meaningful thing. You get the point. Sonic's personality in the games is that he doesn't really have one other than kind of...
So he's proactive, huh?
Oh, God, yes.
Yeah, that. Sega wanted a mascot, they spent all the effort getting that part right, and they landed on Mickey Mouse, but a little more anime and exactly futuristic enough to be intergenerational, countercultural in perpetuity, and they let everything else kind of work itself out. So sometimes he's a superhero or a freedom fighter or a slacker, rocker, rebel, teenager, earnest, smug, sincere, insincere, cuddly, prickly, nice, naughty, whatever. For the movie, they settled on child, possibly very immature teenager with a vague schmear of feral orphan, lost boy pathos, which, okay, if you're going to work with that because just filming the game would be expensive, my guess was talking animal, knee-high to an adult human, kids like him, and he's kind of the Flash, zeroing in on metaphors for traveling, moving, getting away, running away, being a runaway, not being able to stay in one place, moving through places and appreciating the things around you, life passing by. That's about where you're gonna go. So obviously thought went into this. Conceptually, that works. You can see how they might have landed on a drifter on the run as a way to make the, oh no, I dropped my rings and scattered them, I need to stop and collect them again, put these things into a story filtered through a narrative with coherency and talent, and with a few more tries, that could have been something. With a few more tries than that, you might have even had a movie. I'm Bob, and that's the big picture. Sonic 2, it's better than the first one. It's still not the same thing as being good, because the first one was an absolute god-awful travesty, and everything wrong with that one is still, in fact, wrong with this one, so in some ways the bad stuff sticks out even worse now, even if it's somehow balanced out more, maybe. I recognize that won't matter to a lot of Sonic the Hedgehog fans, because this franchise has always had an exceptionally lopsided bad-to-good ratio, so everyone who can still care is clearly inoculated against enduring the bad parts to get to the stuff they want, and when Sonic 2 eventually runs out of reasons to extend its barely 15 minutes worth of actual storytelling and character development to an inexcusable 2.5 hours of extraneous bad comedy and worse world building and can just deliver a giant scale climax of video game fan service, yeah, that part basically works. A ton of people will tell themselves the undeniably fun last 20 minutes or so of this bad movie redeems the rest of it, and while I won't agree, yeah, I get it. Fine. Life is short, enjoy a Hedgehog movie. If I was myself carrying around the baggage of Sonic nostalgia, I'd completely understand. Bless, bless. It's still bad, though. Sorry. So if you're just joining us, or can no longer remember the world before the plague, this is an adaptation of a video game character, best remembered for having starred in exactly 3 unquestionably classic 16-bit Sega Genesis games in the 1990s, and then piles of very, very questionable everything else in the decades since. Its story and main character here reimagined for the 1000th time into an Alf, Howard the Duck, Mac and Me alike, in which the main character is a fast-running furry alien child displaced to rural America, wherein his previous adventure saw him adopted by a small-town sheriff after defeating Jim Carrey's evil military drone mastermind who wanted to steal his powers because reasons. It was interminably bad, but it made a shit ton of money because kids' films have a built-in theatrical multiplier based on the likelihood of group viewing or parental chaperones, and also they delayed it and changed the CGI at the apparent behest of outraged fans of the games who now feel they have some kind of symbolic ownership stake of the brand, which means we're now faced with one of those awkward genre property adaptation sequels where a status quo that initially had nothing to do with more outlandish aspects of the original material, which being a video game from the 1990s involves giant robots, extended cast of furry animal pals, multiple alien worlds and dimensions, ancient conflicts and prophecies between enemy races with absurdly convoluted internecine rivalries, magical stones that need collecting and combining into an even bigger, more magical stone, devious paramilitary organization, and the absolute end of the universe, because of course, getting hurriedly retrofitted into the normie family-friendly comedy world established by the first one, mostly to the detriment of both aesthetic elements. To wit, with Sonic's human supporting cast jetting off to Hawaii for the wedding of the most annoying supporting character from the first film in order to set up an arduously overlong sidekick-centric second act that notably may be the first time I've ever found myself unironically thinking the words "Shamar Moore, you're better than this," and meaning it. Carrie's Dr. Robotnik returns to Earth with a new conditional partner in Idris Elba's Knuckles, an echidna warrior with vaguely defined connections to Sonic's still pretty vaguely defined itself origin story, whose power is punching things and needs to find a magical emerald because he does, and also wants to either kill or beat the shit out of Sonic because origin things. Joined by also newly arrived alien Foxboy Tails, Sonic has to find the emerald first and also maybe convince Knuckles that the obvious villain he's working for is an obvious villain, so the three cute fuzzy animal friends can eventually team up and fight him in the aforementioned good part of the movie final battle. There is admittedly some stuff that works in all of this. Making most of the main action strictly Carrie versus the CG animals is the right call. He's doing broad shtick here, but his take on Robotnik as a genuinely evil mad scientist guy who's a clown but also legitimately dangerous and a not joking mean guy who really does want to hurt people hits a lot stronger when he's mainly bullying or manipulating cartoon animal teenagers. The dynamic he has opposite Sonic, where both the good guy and the bad guy are these snarky wisecracking jerks of different vintage, has some energy to it, you know, like a Spider-Man versus the Joker thing. You don't see that too often, and it contrasts nicely with Elba playing Knuckles as this constantly exasperated super serious bruiser guy who keeps being confused or offended by the total insincerity surrounding him. You know, I mean, it's one punchline that they keep doing over and over, and you've seen it before. It's basically Worf jokes, but it lands more often than it doesn't, and I mean, it's a movie for 8-year-olds, so it'll be new to them. On the flip side, the narrative ends up leaving Tails without much to actually do, which is surprising. It's weird that these kids' movies don't have any room for their kid characters. He's basically just a plot device, mostly to drive what's meant to be a character arc about growing up and taking care of others for Sonic that's all tell and very little show. I feel like it might have worked if this version of Sonic was more of a genuine, smug, reckless asshole like he's been in some of the games and cartoons, but here he's set up as such a nice guy from the jump in the last movie that the arc is over before it starts. The main thing Tails ends up contributing are the comedy props the humans use for the aforementioned Act 2 action detour, which again stops an already much too long film dead in its tracks so that the secondary non-CGI animal cast can recreate someone's idea of the kind of movies Melissa McCarthy stopped making for a reason. Again, there's an element of banging one's head into the wall resignation to these things since, yeah, eventually after like a whole movie's worth of mediocrity, dance contests, bad comedy, DOA character arcs, and what looks like it might have been in the space for a natural ending at one point, there's an extra near half hour a movie given over to someone saying, look, there's been like 30 Marvel, Avengers, etc. things at this point showing you how to end these and make everyone go home happy. Just do that, but with Sonic stuff, and everyone will like it and forgive the rest of the movie, and it kind of works. The finish is a lot of fun, probably everything Sonic fans could ever have hoped to have reasonably seen in a movie. The post-credit stuff will excite the fans even more. However marginal, this is an improvement, so I'll say 5 out of 10. I did not want to gouge both of my eyes out most of the time.